Hello there and welcome. In this video I'd like to have a closer look at the Death Stranding trailers that have been released so far and sort of break them down a bit, maybe do a little bit of theorising as to what all the different elements in the videos could mean. Now Hideo Kojima, who's heading up the production of this game, has given some interviews, so I do have a bit of information to go on, but even so, obviously I could be wrong about a lot of these things, so take everything I say with a pinch of salt. I'm just having a bit of fun speculating. So without further ado, let's dive in. Now in several shots we do see Sam carrying around boots with him, so this does suggest that things do wear out and degrade, that you may need to upgrade and repair items, so there may actually be more RPG-like elements to this open world Kojima game than we may have first expected. Now one thing I noticed in this scene was this little spaceman keyring, and it seemed a bit odd that Sam would be carrying this around with him, and I initially thought, well, maybe it's just Kojima having a little bit of fun with us, just putting this little curiosity in there, and maybe it's just a reference to the actual logo of Kojima Productions, which is actually a spaceman. And then it gets to the end of the release trailer and we hear this.
The whole wide world will be yours to explore. You'll be able to go wherever you want, even the moon. Sam, we want you to go west.
Will we be going to the moon? Is that actually a location in the game? So then I began to think maybe that promotional video for the Kojima logo was more than it appeared to be. Maybe that spacesuit is actually in the game and we'll get to actually put it on and bounce around in the moon in low gravity, kicking up space dust. I mean, what that's got to do with the game, I have no idea. But also, you actually see the die-hard character in the spacesuit. So that again leads more credence to this actually being more than just a logo, sort of promotional video. This is actually maybe our first glimpse of Death Stranding, but we just didn't realise. One of the things I appreciate is the lack of a conventional HUD. Like in the bottom left and right of the screen, there isn't your usual health bar and life counters and all that sort of nonsense. For me, that kind of screams you're playing a game. It kind of breaks the immersion. So I like it when games have sort of in-game objects that indicate those kind of things. And that seems to be the case with the bracelets in this game. You see Sam wearing a bracelet and the colour of the bracelet does change. And you even see the NPC characters wearing bracelets as well. I could be wrong, but I think it's a health indicator. When it's blue, I think everything's good. When it goes orange, that's when, yeah, you might be in trouble. And also these bracelets seem to have some sort of display capability where you could actually access them and get more information about your health and status. The one thing I noticed in the trailers was you tend to have to correct your balance when you're walking around. You can stagger and almost fall over, but Sam will then correct himself. It's like your centre of gravity is actually programmed into the game. Now whether you have to correct yourself manually with the stick, and that's sort of part of the gameplay, or whether it's automatic, and I kind of suspect it is because otherwise it might get a bit irritating. But there's lots of little touches like that. You see Sam looking around as he's walking around. You see him sort of shaking off his hand when he's finished climbing to get the dirt off his hand. Kojima was actually asked, is this just for the trailers, just to make them look good, or is this actually in the game? And Kojima confirmed this actually is in the game, it's programmed in, so it's as if Sam's centre of balance and the physics around that are actually in the game. Now have a quick listen to this dialogue.
Once there was an explosion, a bang which gave birth to time and space. Once there was an explosion, a bang which set a planet spinning in that space. Once there was an explosion, a bang which gave rise to life as we know it. And then came the next explosion.
Now I think the first explosion Sam's referring to is the Big Bang, or Big Bang Theory, the birth of the universe, the singularity, and expansion of the universe and all the particles coming into being and planets and stars formation, that sort of thing. And I think the second explosion that Sam's referring to is actually more of a collision at the early stages of the formation of our solar system. When planet Earth was sort of young, there was actually two orbital bodies close to each other. We had sort of the young Earth and another large body, planet-sized body, and that actually collided with Earth, and it was sort of a glancing blow, and this is what caused the Earth to spin. And this is why we have 24 hours a day and a North and South Pole, and we have our seasons. So this was an important event. And the third bang that Sam refers to, I think he's actually talking about collisions again, where asteroids hit the Earth when it was young and deposited a lot of icy water on the Earth, and that's where we got most of our water from, and that's why we're a blue planet. And of course life started in the oceans, so this is what he's referring to. Now the fourth explosion, this is where Kojima takes some artistic license. This is where he's sort of using his imagination, and I think it's referring to some sort of cataclysmic event that has led to everything we're seeing in these trailers. And I think that Kojima isn't just world building here, he's universe building. I think this fourth explosion is where our universe has actually collided and overlapped with another universe. And I think this oily substance is almost like one of the universes is bleeding into the other, where space and time is overlapping upon itself. Now I'll get to why I think that a bit later. Now inversion does seem to be a thing in Death Stranding. Kojima did state that when you die, you go to this other world which is upside down and underwater. Also, Hades is referred to in the trailers as well. Now Hades was a Greek god of the underworld. So this could be the inverted world that Kojima's talking about. Now Hades could be this inverted universe I was talking about that overlaps on ours. Or it could be some kind of purgatory, maybe an in-between world between our universe and this other universe, maybe some sort of halfway house. But it could definitely explain why objects seem to be floating upwards, like even people are floating upwards in the game at some points in the trailers, as if they're being subject to gravity of this other world rather than our gravity. And this obviously other world being inverted, that means that falling for them would be floating for us. So when we see this clip of Sam floating downwards, is he floating downwards? Is he floating upwards? It gets very confusing. Now this would actually explain why we're seeing inverted rainbows, because the rainfall, or the timefall as it's called, isn't actually from our world, it's actually from this other alternate world, this inverted world, and that's why it's affecting time, because time is obviously different in this other world. And also to explain why we're seeing inverted rainbows, because rainbows normally follow the curvature of the Earth because of the lensing effect of our atmosphere, but of course we're seeing the lensing effect of this other world which is inverted to ours. In this shot we can even see whales and shoals of fish swimming upside down. Now there are plastic dolls everywhere in these trailers with their arms and legs missing. They look really creepy. There's one with nails in its head. I really don't know why there would be plastic dolls spread around the world of Death Stranding. Now they seem to be related to the British babies in some way. I mean, they're everywhere in these trailers. I can't imagine they're just there for the trailers. I'm sure they are in the game as well. So they must be very significant. But what that significance is, just really escapes me. Now you often see Sam wearing this sort of bluey grey uniform. And it has the number 0914137 on it. Now I'm guessing that's his employee number. And it says Porter on the legs and the shoulders of the suit. And I think that signifies his job role, to carrying things from one place to another. There's also another uniform that's orange coloured, and you see Sam wearing it sometimes, and you see some other NPCs wearing it. And this uniform seems to be for when they're carrying bodies. And if you zoom into the armband on the orange suit, it actually says Corpse Disposal Team 6. So obviously there's more disposal teams, and it says Bridges on the suits as well. This is the organisation that Sam works for. So some people are saying that Sam Porter Bridges is his full name, but I don't think that. I think Sam is his name, Bridges is the company he works for, and Porter is his main job. Of course I could be wrong. Now why the Bridges organisation has to transport and dispose of bodies, that's still a bit of a mystery, and we actually see a body here being incinerated. Now these corpses seem to be bound up almost like Egyptian mummies, and they appear to have gold death masks just like Egyptian mummies. The ancient Egyptians thought that gold was the skin of the gods and it had special properties. But I don't think this is actually gold. I think this is some sort of exotic element that is actually key to all the special powers and abilities in the game. Now if we zoom into this logo, it actually says United Cities of America as opposed to the United States, obviously. So there's been sort of a restructuring. Society's broken down. I think rural life is no longer a thing. Like literally everybody now is living in cities, and of course that seems to be the way things are actually heading for us in the real world. And I think it's more sort of a social statement that Kojima's making, that society is much more fragmented and people are sort of living in these isolated pockets. Now Kojima wants to stress the importance of physical connections in this game, and we literally see that literally everywhere. We see strands between the creatures on the beaches that have actually stranded themselves. Obviously there's sort of a double meaning there. And we see strands in the landscape come in pairs, and they seem to be intertwined, going from the ground all the way up into the sky, maybe connecting with the other upside down world. And the greatest connection of all is really between a parent and child. And we see that here at the start of the reveal trailer with Sam on the beach. He's naked and we see an infant child. So it's really bare bones sort of connection. We see the umbilical cord or synthetic looking umbilical cord between the two of them. And there's an author that Kojima really likes that talks about man creating ropes to keep things close to us that are really important to us. And what's more important to a person than their infant child? So Kojima really is going overboard with the symbolism in this game. Now umbilical cords do seem to play a big part in this game. The bridge babies seem to be connected to people via umbilical cords. And I think we can see where this connection is made here on Sam. We can see this cross-shaped scar, and it's no coincidence that it's on his stomach. And we can see that Cliff also has this cross-shaped scar, which seems to be glowing here as he sort of rises up out of this oily, inky substance. Now Cliff does talk about having a strong connection with the other side, and I think it's because of this gold coloured exotic element that I spoke of before. I think it's implanted inside his stomach. I'm really speculating here, but maybe this substance is inside him and that's why it's glowing, because it's being activated as he's transferring to the other side. And we can see him emerging into this World War I like trench setting. So this is definitely the purgatory world that he's actually sort of emerging into. Now we can see here that Sam is wearing a Native American Indian dream catcher necklace. Now these dream catchers were actually meant to protect infants from evil spirits and sort of capture them so that they don't harm the infant. And that's the idea behind the web design, i.e. webs, capture things. And at the center of the web we can see a gold looking material. I think this is that exotic material, and I think it's there as like a lure. I think it actually attracts BTs. So the idea being that the necklace will protect Sam from BTs. Obviously it's not really of any practical use, it's just more of sort of a lucky charm, I suppose. Now tears also seem to be a big thing in the trailers. We see Fragile and Sam crying, but they don't seem to be like sad as such. They seem to be sort of expressionless, but they seem to have tears, as if it's some sort of reaction to BT's being around. Now the Higgs character and also Cliff seem to cry black tears, which suggests that they have more of a stronger connection with the other side. So that would suggest that Cliff's character is more of an antagonist like Higgs. I think the Cliff character definitely seems to go through more of a transformation than the other characters. We see him at some parts in the trailers looking quite ordinary, and at other parts he looks much more sinister. In one scene, quite disturbingly, we see Higgs seem to lick a tear off of Fragile's cheek. Higgs definitely seems to be the main antagonist in the game. Now, why Lindsay Wagner's character seems to be crying tears of blood, that's very disturbing, and I have no idea. You're on your own with this one. If you have any idea, any clue, then feel free to leave a comment. Now in this scene we can see Sam as being captured by this huge titan and this big explosion, and he gets taken to the other side. And when this happens, a big crater is left behind. And I think this is the result of the two universes overlapping on each other. And there's a matter-antimatter explosion. And the reason I think that's the case, I'll get to a bit later on when I start talking about the mathematical formulas that seem to be a big part of this game. Now webs do seem to crop up quite a lot in the trailer, and they are interconnecting structures, so that does sort of fit in with the underlying message behind the game. The Dreamcatcher is a web structure, and when we see Cliff in the World War I trench, for a brief moment we do see a web structure forming around him. And in the Bridges company logo there is a web, and it's no coincidence that the centre of the web falls on where Washington DC is located, which of course is where the White House is. The one thing that's quite intriguing is these strange humanoid figures in the sky that appear. Sometimes they're white, sometimes they're black. They seem to be very uniform, equispaced, and we see them around this crater. This is obviously one of the big sort of matter-antimatter explosions. I think they're referred to as void outs. And we also see them here. We see Fragile and Sam looking up into the sky, and we see the same figures, but this time they're white. They're very mysterious, but obviously quite significant. Handprints seem to feature quite prominently in these trailers. Even in Sam's esophagus we can see a handprint. Obviously the BTs, these strange beings, leave handprints in our world. Even the head of this titan seems to be two hands clasping together. And from the Japanese trailer we see these golden pairs of hands that seem to come up from the ground. They seem to be made out of that exotic gold material. And also we see handprints all over Sam's body. Now here we see Sam in the sort of upside down underwater purgatory world, and it looks as though some ink is actually sort of coming off of his chest, and there seems to be a new handprint that maybe have been formed on his body. So people are saying that when you die or when you're taken to this other world, you get a new handprint. So the more handprints on your body, the more times you've gone over to the other side. So it's almost as if the handprint has been left there when there's a void out and the baby was touching your body. It's kind of creepy. Now in this clip we see Sam reaching for a photo that's obviously very important to him, and a drop of rain or timefall, as it's referred to, lands on his hand, and we can see where that drop lands that his skin rapidly ages. And I think this may be a clue to what happened to Lindsay Wagner's character, because we see her when she was really young in the trailers, and we also see her really old in the White House. Now apparently she is the president of the cities of America, and in the photo we actually see Lindsay Wagner's character, and she seems to have her arms around Sam and a pregnant lady. Now the relationship between these characters is unclear. Now Sam could be related to Lindsay, maybe not, maybe they're just visiting the White House for some reason. Now it does seem a bit odd, the name Sam Porter Bridges, and as I pointed out before, I don't think it's his real name. But why isn't he using his real name? Some people are saying that maybe he's forgotten his past, and maybe this photo is all he has of his past. Maybe the fact that the pregnant woman's face is obscured in the photo is sort of symbolic of that. He has no real memory of her. In some scenes you see ruined buildings, and initially I thought there must have been some sort of explosion that caused this. But then I thought, well, wait a minute, maybe it's the timefall. Maybe it doesn't just affect organic material. Anything that isn't man-made, or anything that isn't synthetic, maybe is affected by the timefall. So even the structure of buildings will age, and concrete and brick will deteriorate. Now the yellow tape that holds Sam's packages in place does seem to have some very intriguing properties. And I think it says on the tape something like void if broken, something like that. So I think that means that the package won't be accepted at its destination if the tape has been broken. In this scene, the tape actually seems to glow when it's under stress, sort of warning you that it might snap. So this definitely seems to be a game mechanic. Like, you definitely have to be careful of this. If it does break, you may have to start the delivery mission all over again. Now, some of the scenes in the trailers seem to be occurring during World War I and World War II. You seem to go into purgatory, and then you have to make your way back to your body, or fight your way through these trenches in World War I, and there's World War II tanks and planes. And people are thinking, what is going on here? But it does mention in the trailers about people that cannot break connections with the past. And I'm wondering whether that's because they've experienced some traumatic event. And what's more traumatic than being in a war? So I think what we're seeing here is this echo of the past, these people reliving these traumatic moments. Now, the British organisation seems to be a pretty serious outfit. We actually see Sam descending into what looks like his HQ on this really cool lift, and when he gets to the bottom, his bike seems to be being refueled. Now here we get to see the BB or Bridge Baby recovery system, and it's not quite clear what's going on here. There is a figure that seems to be fluctuating around 100%, some sort of sinking figure, and that does make you think, well, when Sam is out in the field, is the baby actually inside the case or incubator, whatever you want to call it, that he's carrying around on his chest? Another thing that makes me question this, when you see the case fill up with ink, it almost looks like a digital display. There's sort of a grid-like structure as the ink fills up the case. So it makes me wonder whether or not that's some sort of display and the baby's sort of been projected, and that could explain the sinking. And that kind of makes sense, because if the babies are really valuable, you wouldn't want to really put them in danger. So if they could actually project their abilities remotely, then it makes sense to just keep them at HQ. In this scene, we see some people walking into what looks like the sea, as if they've been drawn there, and maybe they're going to go over to the other side and become the BTs. And we see Hartman being drawn away from them by what looks like an invisible BT. Is he being stopped from joining them, or is he trying to stop them from going into the water? Now, one of the reasons I think that BTs are drawn to this gold exotic material is on this mummy we see a gold death mask, and when the BTs come close, the mask seems to sort of evaporate, as if the BTs are absorbing its power. Obviously, could be completely wrong about that, but that's sort of one explanation. At one point, Fragile talks about chiral energy, and I believe this is a reference to chirality, and as I understand it, this is a property where an object cannot be superimposed onto a mirror image of itself on any axis, just like the human hand, interestingly. Also, Fragile talks about dooms, which I believe is a syndrome that you develop, and it allows you to detect the presence of BTs. And in its latter stages, you can even see them. Now, an unfortunate side effect of dooms is you can't tolerate human touch, you can't even form a basic physical connection, you can't even shake hands. Now, I mentioned earlier about the void outs being matter-antimatter explosions, about parallel universes, about time and space overlapping, and I said I'd get to that later on. Well, now is the time. Now Sam has some objects around his neck on a chain that kind of looks like memory sticks to me, maybe some sort of storage medium for carrying around data. Rather than just carrying around physical supplies, maybe you're actually carrying around information. And of course encryption can be broken, so maybe the most secure way to carry things around is by foot. Now interestingly, these sticks seem to have mathematical equations engraved in them, actual physics equations. At one point we see these sticks kind of levitating, defying gravity, as if they have some sort of supernatural properties. And we see them here being read by some sort of interface. We see equations coming up on the display, and people have looked at these equations and they are actual real world physics equations. There's equations to do with time and space and particle physics, theoretical physics, classical physics. Theoretical physics seems to have inspired Kojima, and he's using all these sort of fantastical theoretical physics and the weird properties of subatomic particles to sort of inspire him to create this really far out, weird looking world. And I think that's why so many people are confused by these trailers. Now, although Kojima has obviously taken a lot of artistic license in creating this world, I think there is definitely a sort of mathematical basis to it. I think he's referencing like quantum entanglement, multiverse theory, the Big Bang theory obviously, matter and antimatter, space-time dilation. He's really throwing everything into the mix. And it's something that really hasn't been done to this extent before. And I think it's really cool because it's actually getting people interested in theoretical physics. Now, I got quite excited when I was listening to one of the trailers because I heard the word Chiralium mentioned. And this is when I realised I was saying chiral wrong. I was saying chiral, I was pronouncing it wrong. It's chirality, not chirality. So we're dealing with chiral energy. And more specifically, when chiralium was mentioned, it talked about density, and this related to the number of BTs present.
I got an idea.
Now, whether chiralium is a form of chiral energy or a vessel for chiral energy, not sure about that. And thinking about it, I wonder where chiralium would be in the periodic table. I'm sure Kojima's probably thought about that too. He's probably really gone to town with the exotic properties of chiralium. Exotic elements really do seem to be the rage in sci-fi. And we can see here in Fragile's charm bracelet a lump of chiralium. And why she's wearing this? Maybe just for decoration? Who knows? Now I'd like to reiterate that this is purely all speculation on my part, and I could be totally wrong, and I will be wrong about a lot of this stuff. Now this video is long enough, so I'm going to stop things now. I don't want to go any deeper down the rabbit hole, but there are people poring over these trailers frame by frame, coming up with all sort of interesting ideas, and it's just fun. Kojima's definitely got people thinking. It's got me thinking. I hope it's got you thinking as well. I really enjoyed making this video. I hope you enjoyed watching it, and I'll see you in the next video. Thank you and goodbye.
Watch yourself. Never stay gone for long.
Sorry about that. My cat patch was scent marking the microphone.
But it can't wash everything away. The past just won't let go. I'll see you around. Sam Porter Bridges.